where he would narrate the history of the buildings and the homes that they would pass on the tour. When he couldn't arrange for tours, he would go to places like Parkview Terrace or Cedar Rail and interview residents to preserve their stories of their military experiences or memories of early Marshfield. When conducting the oral interviews, those residents asked for tours. But when Ken wasn't able to arrange for the buses, he decided to make his own series of DVDs for the walking tours of Marshfield's 5 historic districts, which he made copies of for all of the residential communities so that they could view it at their own discretion. As a library reference specialist here at the Marshfield Library, Ken had the opportunity to see many historic resources at the library and the need for those resources to be indexed to make research easier. Here are just a few of the indexes that he authored, with many more that he contributed to. I'm not going to read the list. That is just a small sampling of some of the works that he did. Ken Wood was historic preservation in all that he did. He was generous with his time and talent as a member and officer of several local historical organizations, including the Northwood County Historical Society, the Marshfield Area Genealogy Group, the Marshfield Historic Preservation Commission, the City of Marshfield Plan Commission, and even as one of the history buffs who contributed to the Clark County, Wisconsin History and Genealogy website. Mayor T-Strike, would you please come and join me at this time? And I would also like to call up Lori Belangia to accept the award on behalf of her husband.
Congratulations, Lori. We are so proud of Ken and of you, the commitment that you guys have made to the city of Marshfield and obviously surrounding areas. And don't forget, his book is on sale at Walgreens. So if you haven't read it, check it out. It's dynamite. Well, how can you say? It's an explosive, great book. Lori, congratulations. And we know that Ken is washing down. He hasn't missed a thing. And thank you all for coming here also. Lori, we're very proud. Thank you.
Thank you on behalf of myself and Ken's family. He would be so honored. Thank you.
Thank you again, Vicki, for that great information about Ken and all the good things. And since we are moving on to item N on the next agenda or so, item O, request to approve resolution number 2023-39, appreciation to the state legislator shared revenue funds increase, presented by Steve Bark, City Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, as was mentioned earlier tonight in the special meeting on the 2024 budget, and as I brought up under my comments under City Administrator's update earlier in this meeting, we are blessed to be receiving an additional $1,030,000 here in the city of Marshfield for the 2024 budget in state shared revenue. And you know, it's very easy to criticize. I know I've been heard probably more than a few times saying that, you know, when is the state gonna give us more aid? There's inflation and they're not keeping up with the costs, and that's really hurting cities and villages. And if you're gonna do that, if you're gonna say things that are negative or critical, you really need to follow up and be thankful and grateful and show your appreciation when they take actions to rectify things. And we definitely are proud of the state of Wisconsin for what they've done here in this latest action. So I would recommend approval of resolution number 2023-39, showing that appreciation to the state of Wisconsin, and we would forward this on to our state legislators the governor as well, thanking them for, again, helping to meet the needs of local finances.
Motion by Alderman Giles, second by Alderman Stauber. Any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Item P, request to approve 2024-2028 Capital Improvement Program, presented by Steve Bark, City Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, for the last 4 years, we've done the process of updating the capital improvement program annually. It's a 5-year plan. We've done it by having staff really work to put the project together, bring it to the council. We have 2 work sessions, and then ultimately there's some changes made along the way, sometimes by the council, that's brought later in the month of June, or maybe even into early July in some cases, for final approval. We did have 2 meetings back on May 18th and June 1st. I put the minutes in front of you tonight. I apologize that they were not in the packet. I also put in front of you tonight the proposal as it was prior to the first meeting on May 18th. If you look at the minutes, nothing was changed at the meeting on May 18th, and there was a limited number of adjustments made at the meeting on June 1st, largely items brought forth by staff to adjust the asphalt mill and overlay work, and a couple of other things kind of offsetting it. So with that in mind, there have been no changes since the meeting on June 1st. Staff would recommend approval of the 2024 to 2028 Capital Improvement Program.
Motion by Alderman Giles, second by Alderman Spiros. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Item Q, request to approve revision to the investment policy under guidance from Ellers, presented by Jennifer Solinsky, Finance Director.
Just to provide a little background of where this is coming from, during our borrowing process this year, we met with an additional Ellers consultant regarding an opportunity that I'll bring forward tonight in order to diversify our investments a bit. So we took a look at our investment policy, which really has not been revised since 2001. And under the guidance of the consultant from Ellers, we've updated the policy in terms of updates to statutes, or trying to make it a little bit more broad to provide some flexibility. Overall, I don't think there's any recommended changes in there that puts the city at more risk or harm than the original policy. It just really just brings it up to date in terms of language. So with that, I would ask for approval to update policy 4.95, which is our investment policy.
Motion by Alderman Stauber, second by Alderman Spiros. Any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Item R, request to approve entering into the agreement with Ellers Investment Partners for investment services, presented by Jennifer Solinsky, Finance Director.
As part of meeting with the consultants from Ellers, they have offered an opportunity that I'll bring forward to you tonight in terms of a new agreement for investment of proceeds from our borrowing, which will be given to us on the 29th of June. Under the old, prior to, should we enter into this agreement, those funds were just deposited into our local government investment pool and then drawn upon as needed as we fulfilled the projects that were specified in the bonds. Investing in LGIP does not come without a certain amount of risk. They too invest in government securities, some stocks, some T-bills. Ellers has offered us a similar opportunity, and they believe that they can beat the earnings rate that we would receive from the local government investment pool. So this is just a way to leverage the proceeds that we'll receive from our bonds and a different sort of investment with the potential of earning more money than we would had we just deposited them either in our local bank or the government pool. If we were to do this, any earnings would be deposited into the debt service fund, which would then offset levy in a future year, whereas today those just sort of get distributed in the pool per se. So it's an opportunity to do a little diversification. And obviously you are free to, keep things status quo, and those monies would then be deposited in the LGIP or pursue a little bit of a diversification option. So with that, I would ask for approval to enter into an agreement for investment services with Ellers.
We need a motion?
No,
After the motion and second. Yes, sir. Then you make your comments.
I'll go ahead, but I'd rather second it, if you don't mind. If somebody else wants to make a motion.
Natasha? Motion?
No, I had a question.
Okay, we're gonna make a motion and second, then we'll go on to, discussion. Okay? Thank you. Okay, so we need a motion? Alderman O'Reilly, second. Alderman Weigel. Now, Alderman Wagner.
Okay, thank you. The reason I did that is I understand under parliamentary, I can't vote against my own motion. So I wanted the ability to discuss this before I made a commitment. Basically, the state statutes are pretty rough on us as far as what we can actually invest in. But we wouldn't be putting money in CDs here, would we?
There are different investment vehicles that they could use. Most of our proceeds, they would time it in terms of when we would be actually drawing on the funds. So that by default sort of limits us from longer term investments, because we're going to need those proceeds. If you think of our streets projects, we're going to need that money by October, November. So it's more of a shorter term. So, even putting it in a money market, various money markets, if it does extend out longer, we have a couple projects that may not happen this year, that amount of proceeds could be invested in a longer term. They are, as part of this agreement, they are very familiar with the statute and what can and cannot be invested, our funds can and cannot be invested, and they would take on the responsibility for compliance of whatever tool they choose.
Okay, that's not reassuring. But the other part of it is that they aren't doing this because they love us. They're doing this for a fee, and I think I fell asleep trying to read this thing. What is their fee?
It's going to vary depending on investment model that they choose to invest in. It's also should be noted that the LGIP does also charge fees.
Yes, I know.
And we don't see those as transparently as you might think. Where Ellers is coming from, essentially, they have a similar list of investments, but they believe that their fees would be less than the LGIP. So LGIP is a big conglomerate of all the state's funds.
Right.
And our deposits represent a small portion of that in the LGIP. So it's just a matter of, who can come in with the best fees. Ellers believes they can have a better return. This was something they approached us on. This is something that I'm just offering to you as an alternative to the LGIP.
I think, I know that this makes a lot of sense, and in some cases it would be good money management. I understand that, but gambling it with but it is sort of a gamble. I mean, there's always a gamble involved in that thing. And it could dip into the principal if the returns were low enough, I believe. But what would happen? I guess I'm sort of at a grumbling yes on this thing, but it's sort of like. But the only thing that you need to convince me of is it's okay to have Eilers doing our audit and our financial our investing and everything else at the same time, having all our eggs in one basket. convince me that that's a good idea.
They do disclose to us, so Ellers doesn't handle our audit, they handle
Our
our,
financial.
they handle our bond proceed, or our borrowing.
Right.
And they do disclose that whenever we engage them in an offline manner, such as evaluating the financials of a TID. That's a whole separate agreement. This, the investment portion is a separate division from the group that Dave Ferris leads that you're most familiar with seeing.
Profit center,
Correct.
that's the point.
Alderman Tompkins?
Hi, Jennifer. I have two questions. One, would there be any sort of timeline for when a decision would need to be made about this? Is there a certain timeline? Because we just had our bonds, approved, all of that. So that's my first question. My second question is there any way that we could have sort of a spreadsheet, not a spreadsheet per se, but somewhere where we could look and see these two investment groups, this is the fees, and potentially this would be, the return. I know that's really hard. You said that it wasn't super transparent, but just to see, is this a drastic change in the investment fees that they would be taking? I think that would just be helpful for the decision.
So the answer to your first question is I brought this forward tonight because we will get our proceeds on Thursday. That doesn't mean we have to rush into a decision. Those funds are slated to go to the LJIP as of right now. Your second question is very difficult to figure out how much fees from LGIP are allocated to every entity, because we get a net return. When we earn our interest in the LGIP, it's net of all of those expenses. Currently, for May, we are earning 5.01% interest on our investments, but there's no way to look at what the fees are attributed specifically to Marshfield. I think it would probably be more transparent on the Ellers statement, but at the end of the day, I would be looking at the 5% from LGIP net return versus, if Ellers is confident based on their products that they could earn more than that, that's where we would be gauging whether this is a good choice. Should that fall on the Ellers side below what we're earning in the LGIP, it's simply a transfer over to LGIP to earn the higher interest.
Okay, so we are getting about a 5% net return right now.
And for the month of May, that fluctuates each and every, right, that the rate that we earn in LGIP fluctuates every single month.
Alderman Stauber?
Alderman Wagner was kind of setting the path I wanted to walk, and that, I like Ellers. I think they do quality work. I like the presentations, and I can, support working with a company that we've got a good history with. My concern is that, one, are we, is kind of a scope creep with one firm, and is there any city policy in place that would require us to put something like this additional service out for bid so we can get a better analysis of those providers of investment?
This policy does not call for that, for scoping that out.
Maybe the question, should we then? I'm in sales, so if I can sell something and then sell something in addition to that, that's a good thing. And so I just wonder that we're overcommitting to just one firm that can provide a service that others might provide equally well. And then there's always, the question about what are they investing in, and are those investments in line with values of the city of Marshfield, for example? Not to go off on a tangent, but just not to rush into something like this, but just see what options are available to us, come back with a recommendation. So I'll leave it at that.
Alderman Werman?
Yeah, actually, I liked your comments there because I was kind of thinking along the same lines, and especially when you got to the sales portion, and, you know, having all of our eggs in one basket, my thought process was not that they're doing anything bad or that I wouldn't want to go with them, but more on, it definitely sounds like an upsell of like, hey, we can do a better return. Did they give you any background as to why they believe they could do a better return? Because that would be my thing, right? It's easy to upsell if you can be like, well, I could do that cheaper, but are you cutting corners to do it cheaper or something like that? Like, do they give you any info?
It's, I mean, this is a service they provide. They can look at their own portfolio and compare their return on investment as compared to the LGIP. It's public knowledge what LGIP is returning on a monthly basis, so they have that comparable, you know, as part of their practice.
Anyone else? Okay, we have a motion by Alderman Riley, second by Alderman Weigel. Any other discussion? And do we want to vote on this or do we want to table it? Okay, we need to vote. Okay. All those in favor?
No.
It passes with a nay vote. Or should I say it doesn't pass? How's that?
Okay.
It passed.
No,
It passed.
It passes 5-4. Yeah, there's an absent on partial.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Natasha. Okay, I see it now. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah.
That's okay.
Okay. So it passes with an aye vote.
5-4.
Item S, request to approve resolution number 2023-41, update to public dispensaries presented by Jennifer Solinsky, Finance Director.
So this resolution becomes necessary whenever we enter into a new depository relationship. So upon passing the agreement in the previous agenda item, then we would need this to be passed as well. So with that, I would ask for approval of the resolution.
Motion by Alderman Wagner, second by Alderman Weigel. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Yes.
Motion passes. Item T, discuss creation and composition of possible housing review committee presented by Ed Wagner, Council President.
Thank you, Your Honor. As you all know, we held a joint meeting of the Common Council, the EDB, and had the CDA and involved in that a week or so ago. And the subject was about housing. We were there for a couple of hours. We were exposed to, I guess, all the intricacies of housing, of the housing financing, what size you take, what size of housing we needed. And it was decided we probably couldn't resolve the problem that night. But it was suggested that we form a committee. Well, two things. Number one, the agenda for the night had no provision for taking any action whatsoever, so we couldn't really do that. And the other thing was we would have probably sat there and battled out for another couple of hours of the things that needed to be done about it. So we decided instead to bring it back here and let the council appoint a committee to deal strictly with housing. What I did, I wrote up the background so you could see what was there, and I also highlighted what would be some of the discussion points or some of the things we had to take into consideration in proceeding with this. And I think the first of those was, do we have a consensus that we need such a committee, or is there another entity that can serve in that purpose? If we do have a committee, who should be on it? Who has the statutory responsibility for housing? Who has authority to commit public staff and resources to housing issues? So there's some things that I'm not saying that we should follow this in the discussion we should have now. We don't necessarily have to follow what I wrote down. Basically, is this something we want to do? Is something we need to do? And if so, what do we want them to do? And how will we know when they're done? And how will they know when they're finished? Those are the things that I wanted to bring up to you. I think, I read through the affordable housing report again, and I think there are some gaps in there that we need to answer, that we need to talk about. We've tried a lot of things with housing. We've got the Daniels subdivision, which is, I don't think it's at that point where we can call it a success just yet. And we were also asked at one time to create a TIF that would have provided, among other things, 55 lots for affordable housing. And the council backed off on that. We backed off on it because we weren't entirely sure that that was going to provide affordable housing. But for instance, there seems to be a general consensus, even among those that we talked about at the joint meeting, that we're never going to be able to get affordable housing in a price range that makes it good for the workforce, makes it eligible for the workforce, because it costs too much to build a home from scratch. I think the most interesting thing that was said at that meeting was one realtor saying that you're not going to get this off a new build. You're only going to get this under rehabilitation.
Mm-hmm.
I've run housing rehabilitations before in my life, and let me tell you something: they're no fun, and they are labor intensive for staffing and inspection, especially if you've got public money involved in it. So should we create a committee that will deal with workforce housing only, or should they deal with the whole housing thing? Who should be on it? How many people do you want on it? If you want to do it, let me know. I will be more than happy to facilitate putting the structure together for you, or basically deciding who gets to appoint the people and that sort of thing. So that's where it stands. So I'm just anxious to hear what you have to say.
Alderman Stauber?
I agree. It was a good joint meeting, a lot of good discussion. Stakeholders were present. We heard a lot of interesting perspectives. So the one thing that I think the consensus is, we don't know exactly what the demand is, and we don't know how we supply or meet that demand. In other words, what kind of housing we would supply. Traditional single-family homes may not be the answer. But my question to you, Mr. Wagner, is when you think of our predicament with housing, whatever you define as our predicament, what timing comes to mind for you? Are we like in a, from your perspective, are we in a 1-year window where we really need to have a plan in place, a 2-year window? And the reason I ask is that we've got a key position open within the city. And depending upon what that person brings to the table, he or she may have, a different perspective on what we're thinking about doing. Maybe we want to postpone the formation of a committee until we fill that position.
Alderman Worman, then Alderman Tompkins.
Couple thoughts. First, Ed, thank you for putting this together. This is a fantastic start, I think, given the discussion that we had at that meeting. Secondly, you had made a comment about how long would this go, and I did just want to put out to the council, I don't think that this is a problem that ever really goes away. It's something that, we heard at that meeting, it's been going on for 20 plus years. Yeah. It's something that is constantly changing, and having a construction background, it's fluctuating more fluid than our CRP. So it's going to adjust a lot as the years go on. So I did want to keep that out there, that it's probably going to be an ongoing committee if there is one created, or at least I would suggest it should be. And then I would also suggest that we bring in, or try to bring in, professionals from the industry to do things like that. I think having a realistic outlook from somebody in construction or a contractor or things like that would be heavily useful in a committee like this, because it's very easy on paper to say this is the solution, but then you go to a contractor and they say it's going to cost you this much, and then your whole plan goes down the drain. So just a couple thoughts.
Alderman Tompkins?
I too thank you, Mr. Wagner, for sort of focusing our questions. These are excellent questions that we should grapple with. And I would agree that a committee would be helpful. So that's your first question. Do you think a committee is helpful? Yes. And then I think within that committee, some of these questions should be grappled with, and reports looked at, and external sources, the expertise of different people. So that's just my opinion, that I think it would be helpful to have a separate committee, because I think it's going to take a bit of time and work to answer these questions.
Alderman Wagner?
Oh, thank you. First of all, Russ, thanks for your comments. I think you hit on some good things there. And Derek, you also. I've been watching what other communities do. And ours, I think we've been focused on the idea that we're going to build a subdivision and all of a sudden our problems are going to be gone. That's not true. You're right. These things have been going on forever. I have sought the advice of some developers and talked to them and gotten some hints about what has to be done. And finding out what our need is, focusing in on our need, what's our priority? Is it buildable communities? Is it green communities? Is it a mixed use of everything from developmentally disabled to swimming pools and community rooms? It's everything from that. We need to focus better, much better. And if we do form a committee, maybe this sounds a little silly. I'm almost embarrassed to say it, but maybe we need a committee to form a committee. I don't know. We've done worse in Marshfield, but the idea is maybe we need to talk about what this is and bring a recommendation back to the council. And ask Her Honor to chair that committee and also bring in what people she might want with her to make some of those decisions.
Alderman Stauber?
So I'm thinking back to meetings that we had when we were talking about a new cultural center, which turned out to be a new library. We had brainstorming sessions. I'm not sure who led those. I can't recall, but we broke into groups and it was a lot of work. And I think, I hear what you're saying, Derek, about bringing in a professional. I would be a little bit leery if you bring in a professional who's going to have a natural bias. Their history might be multifamily or subsidized housing or, traditional housing. I think a first step is going to be to have someone to facilitate who may be far removed from the industry, but at least they know how to facilitate a meeting and to get the ideas flowing and to help us prioritize what we think we need. And then, tied to that conversation might be available resources that we think we have access to, grants, what have you. And then maybe we start, I don't know if we would solicit developers, but at least we would be in a position to maybe come up with a strategic plan so that when a developer were to approach us, we would know if it's a fit to our plan or not.
Alderman Wagner? Oh, microphone. Thank you.
With I was able to use the free services of the Regional Planning Commission for a facilitator to basically lead the group discussions. And what the process you were talking about was nominal group process, which is pretty good at finding out what the community really thinks and what the community really needs. Maybe we can, the Wood County Board has just become a member in the last year or 2 years, I think, of the Regional Planning Commission. We get that service for free. So if the council would direct me to, I could contact them, see if they could get a facilitator in here to help us focus on this thing.
Alderman Weigel?
Thank you. I think Mr. Warman and Mr. Wagner made some pretty good points that kind of conjoined there at a certain point where, yes, this is a problem that's been going on since I've been in Marshfield. It almost seems like, the cliche phrase of this is a problem. And I think at some point we have to look back and say, is it really a problem or is it something that we just keep on saying? And if it is a problem, then I think the next question we have to ask ourselves is, as a city government, what role do we take in to do this? And I don't know, I don't have those answers to those questions today. But to Mr. Wagner's point, maybe we do need a committee to address those two questions first. And if it turns out that we do in fact need more housing and we do in fact have a role to play, then at that point we can, hone in on an actual focus of what we need to actually be doing here. I feel like we all want to do something beneficial for the community, but I feel like we're taking off or biting off more than we can chew at the time. And I think we want to walk before we can run here, and maybe first get our bearings straight, make sure we're going in the right direction, and then once we make sure we're in the right direction, then go forward with some actual concrete plans here.
Any other comments or suggestions? So how do we move forward? Do we want to? Yes.
Yeah, and that's almost exactly what I was going to ask, is I think it sounds like the general consensus is that we probably need at least some sort of committee to start, even if it's a committee to create the committee. So my question would be, do we need to create a motion here tonight to create said committee? And at that point, I think the discussion needs to move into, as a council, who should be on that committee determining the next steps.
Would you like to make the motion?
I would, but I would like to discuss who we need to have on that committee first, because I think if we just say, yes, we need to make a committee, I mean, I could absolutely volunteer, but if there's other council members that need to be on it, if there's members from other boards that need to be on it, I think we should discuss that now before we put that into motion.
Alderman Weigel?
Yeah, I think to follow up too, before we can identify who should be on the committee, I think we need to identify what the questions the committee's trying to answer.
Mm-hmm.
And then at that point, we can find the right people to match for the committee.
Alderman Stauber?
So kind of circling back then, not to delay things, but because there might be a tie to economic development and our role as, city, do we want to postpone any action until we fill the position of the economic development role, I think that you talked about at finance, budget, and personnel? That person may or may not bring some good leadership. And I think Natasha has a hand up. So.
Natasha?
I think we do have a little bit of a timeline because we have a closing TID, and we could use 100% of those tax revenue from that TID for affordable housing, but you only get 1 year to use it. So that's an extension on the TID. And correct me if I'm wrong, if someone knows, I think that's closing maybe in the next 2 years. So I think that is sort of our timeline, that if we want to take advantage of that money, we should probably have some sort of plan in place before that happens.
Yeah, what you're referring to is that we are looking to close TIF District number 5. That's the Mill Creek Business Park District in 2024. And that will give us that 1 year opportunity to capture some increment and use it for affordable housing. So that is a potential opportunity for us. I think in the broader sense, I mean, I'm not saying that's not a good idea. I do want you to know that staff continues to talk about things that are being brought our way. You'll be seeing some things from us in the coming weeks. People who are interested in doing some housing. So, I mean, we're not going to stand totally in place while this goes on. But I do think it's important for the council and others to get some sort of a consensus as to what they really want to see, pursued.
Alderman Wagner?
Yeah, I can agree with that. I think as far as the timeline goes, we are out. I think we're not talking about months, we're talking about seasons. When are we going to be able to start? I don't think we're going to be able to start up anything that will take place much before next spring. I mean, even if we wanted to do something like that. So that'll give us time to forming a committee and then giving them a timeline to say deliver to the council on the second meeting in March in 2024 your plan for providing affordable housing or workforce housing or housing period for the city of Marshfield. I think that would give them time to develop a plan, to do the research, interview people, And bring in a facilitator, maybe even bring the community in on they used to call it a charrette too. You remember that? Okay. Yeah, I mean, we could do that kind of thing. If you'd like, I can make that in the form of a motion.
Would you please?
Okay, I did.
You're gonna have to recap that. I really don't know what your motion is.
Whatever you said, Jess.
Okay. Basically, I would like to, the motion would be to have the mayor appoint a committee consisting of no more than 7 people to decide how to put a task force together to provide a housing plan to the city council at the second meeting in March of 2024. And if I repeated all that the same way I did the first time, I'll be lucky. But there you go.
And second by Alderman Werman. Any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Yes.
Motion passes. Item U, request to approve the appointment of John Tracy, 7990 Yellowstone Drive, Hewitt, to the Economic Development Board to complete an unexpired term ending in April 2025. Motion by Alderman Stauber, second by Alderman Giles. Any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Yes.
Motion passes. Item V, request to approve the appointment of Carol Knuff, 126020 Old Plain Road, Stratford, to the Business Improvement District Board to complete an unexpired term ending in April 2024, presented by me, and you have it in your packet. Tonight, we're only reading. The next meeting, July 11th, we will vote. Item W, election of audit committee members, 3, presented by Ed Wagner, council president.
Okay, we have, at long last, we have people who have volunteered to serve on an audit committee. The timing's probably pretty good. We just got our audit tonight. This would be interesting. But hold on, I missed, my computer just killed it. The 3 people are,
Your 3 people are
Vicky.
Victoria Burt, Josh Jansen, and Steve Katona.
where you were saying we need to vote on the first 2, whether or not to accept the mayor's appointments? Or
You have the ordinance
council's
written as
appointments?
an election, so first you can nominate and elect all in one, as there are only 3 candidates for 3 open positions. And then you'll also have to have a nomination selecting 1 member for a 1-year term, 1 member for a 2-year term, and 1 member for a 3-year term.
But you can do that by 1 motion though, right?
We'll need 2 motions, 1 to nominate
Right.
and elect, and 1 to, at least 1 to defeat terms.
Okay, so I would move to accept the nominees, all 3 of the nominees, elect them to the audit committee.
And second by Alderman Werman. You want to close the nominations, Ed?
I'll close, yeah, sure.
Thank you. Seeing no other discussion, please vote.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Now, how do you want to handle this, Ed? 1, 2, and 3,
1, 2, and 3 sounds good.
top
to me.
down? I
Yes.
think that sounds good.
Vicky on top of it, right?
So she'd be 1 year.
1 year, and then, who would be the second one? The third
They're on
one.
your list alphabetically by Mrs. Burt, Mr. Jansen, and Mr. Katona.
Okay, here it is, yeah, Mr. Katona would be the 3-year, Mr. Jansen would be the 2-year, and Victoria would be 1 year.
We have a motion by Alderman O'Reilly, second by Alderman Weigel. Any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Yes.
All ayes, thank you. And one thing we forgot to put on the agenda is items for further, so we'll count that WA. How's that? Items for further, and for the next agendas. Any discussions? Alderman O'Reilly.
Yeah, I would like an update on where we are with the employee satisfaction survey. We could get that, please. Thank you.
Alderman Stauber.
Mr. Wagner, correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as the emergency preparedness, wasn't there an action item to update the council on what our role was? Or am I just?
Oh,
Because I think that's an outstanding item, and given the presentation tonight, I'm a little confused.
I think, yes, you did ask that. I think that wasn't, you mentioned it was an open item at the end of the discussion.
So, yeah, so I'll give you credit for that. I mean, you asked it after the presentation, so I'd like to put that on a future agenda item, just so we know, again, if there's an emergency, I would like to know in advance what my role is or isn't before the emergency happens.
And where you're gonna stand?
That'll be the fire and police commission would give you that information. That information would come from fire and police commission. Right.
Anyone
Well,
else?
the committee, yeah, the emergency preparedness committee.
Otherwise, who would like to make a motion to adjourn? Nobody? Whoever wants to stay here? Motion by Alderman Spears, second by Alderman Wagner. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. 8:30, that's what we said.
That was good, yeah.
So perfect.
you.